Hey, howdy hey, and welcome back to Emily's Adventures in Horrorland. Today I'm going to be doing the Killer Flicks tag, which originated from the Facebook group Killer Flicks, which is a wonderful horror movie-based community. But before I get into questions, I thought I'd address a little something for those of you who aren't on my Facebook page. Many of you have put in requests for horror movies I should review, and I think that's great, I'm always happy to do those, but it is a bit of a long list. So I've decided to put it on my new Patreon page, where there's a section where it can be easily viewed and easily updated by me. There's some rewards and goals that I've set up as well, but you're by no means obligated to donate, and it won't cost you a thing to request movies, but if you'd like your request to move up the list, then you can either donate or pick something that someone else already asked for. For example, my next review is going to be The Exorcist 3 because 2 people have asked for it. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for bearing with. Without further ado, here are the questions.
1. Who is your favourite vampire character, performance, etc. in a killer flick?
Well, the Bela Lugosi performance was definitive and pretty subtle, all things considered. Things like walking through the spiderweb without breaking it, that kind of thing. But my favourite is Christopher Lee from Horror of Dracula, because just the fabulous contacts, the raw radiating charm, I just love it.
2. What was the very first killer flick that opened your eyes to the world of horror?
My earliest horror movie memory was age 7, when I saw The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. There's a scene where the scarab beetle buries under the skin of somebody's arm, and I saw it and I just had nightmares for weeks. It was pretty terrifying, but might not count as horror. I don't know, I remember a lot of family action-adventure movies having just really scary moments. Do you remember the spiders from the original Jumanji? I mean, Jesus fucking Christ.
3. What's a really standout geographical setting for a killer flick, i.e. The Thing is set in Antarctica? Any you really remember and love for being so original?
Ah, The Thing would have been a good answer, damn it. Hellraiser 2 is pretty cool, as we get to see the chilling domain of the Cenobites. It's something that could only have existed within the Hellraiser franchise, and I like it a lot. Also, Club Dread has an interesting setting, or for the time it did anyway. I think tropical horror became a brief subgenre for the period afterwards. But I like horror movies to be brightly lit and brightly coloured now and then.
4. What killer flick are you embarrassed to say you love?
There aren't too many. Some people pucker up a bit when I tell them I like Saw 6, but I thought putting the lives of other people in the hands of the player was an interesting change in the dynamic, and it made for some pretty interesting traps, in my humble.
5. There are a lot of killer flicks out there based on true events. Do you have a favourite? And how accurate do you think that story is?
I'm very sceptical about based on true events type horror. The Amityville Horror, I suppose, was interesting, but I tend to separate the actual DeFeo murders from the alleged supernatural happenings. I view the latter just purely as fiction.
6. What director would you like to see crossover franchises and make a killer flick? Example, Rob Zombie doing a Friday the 13th.
Ooh, tricky. I wouldn't mind seeing one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films directed by Quentin Dupieux. I think I pronounced that right. He's the guy who made Rubber. So he seems to have a knack for absurdist horror, and you'd think dream worlds by nature would be kind of surreal and unpredictable. So I don't know, maybe I shouldn't talk about the Freddy films, I haven't quite seen them all yet.
7. What killer flick movie was the toughest watch? Examples, Triangle, Inside, Salo, Audition, etc.
I've seen all of those, except for Triangle. I'll get on that. The hardest for me to watch would be Dans ma peau, or In My Skin, which is a French extremist horror about a woman who gets into self-mutilation. Those scenes are very, very hard to watch without wincing or hissing or something. Also the movie The Girl Next Door, the 2004 version, obviously. Very, very disturbing to watch. It's also supposed to be based on true events, and it felt very real. It felt truly dreadful.
8. Who's your favourite killer flick final girl other than Jamie Lee?
Probably Ashley Lawrence. Or Mark Patton, does he count?
9. Which killer flick has scarred you for life?
There hasn't been a horror movie that scarred me past the point of causing a few nightmares, which is a bit of an occupational hazard in the horror community, I think, depending on what kind of person you are. But the movie we need to talk about, Kevin, that struck a bit of a nerve with me. I couldn't finish it. But that's just a personal thing, since I have a semi-rational fear of motherhood.
10. What killer flick has the most killer soundtrack?
Ooh, interesting. I think the score in 1408 is very good. Also the soundtrack for Hellraiser is bloody awesome. And there's also the unreleased themes by the band Coil, which are very cool, but I like the one they went with better.
11. What is the single greatest kill in a killer flick?
A couple of the deaths in À l'intérieur, or Inside, are extraordinarily bloody. It led me to declare the film once the queen of splatter films. So I guess I'll go with that.
12. What do you think is the best performance in a killer flick?
I like Isabel Fuhrman in Orphan. For someone as young as she was at the time to not only pull off that Russian accent, but also depict a really ruthless character who could still convince others of her innocence. I think she did a great job. Doug Bradley in Hellraiser, obviously, and also Tony Todd in Candyman. I'm sure a lot more went into the performance than just Todd himself, sound mixing on his voice or whatever, but it pulls you in, it's hypnotic almost, and I think that's great.
13. What killer flick horror location would you like to visit?
To be honest, I've never been interested in visiting a filming location in real life, so the camping ground from Friday the 13th, the Amityville house, Michael Myers' house from Halloween, I'm just not the sightseeing type. I didn't come to New York for the Empire State Building. Also, if I was visiting, I'd feel like I was being a nuisance to the locals, so maybe if there was a horror movie that incorporated a pre-existing mad spectacle of nature and it happened to be not too dangerous a spot, then I might be interested. In terms of locations from within the horror movies themselves, it might be interesting to go to the fictional town of Hobbs End from In the Mouth of Madness. Just long enough to see a few Lovecraftian monsters and then I'd get back on my bicycle and get the fuck out of there.
And 14. Are there any killers from a killer flick that you sympathize with?
Sure, I think that many of Clive Barker's characters can be viewed as anti-heroes and can be sympathetic, so the Cenobites, Candyman, maybe the creatures from Nightbreed, but I haven't seen the whole movie so I don't know if they're killers or not. But I'm going to say Norman Bates though. He can go from kind and accommodating to defensive and hostile in a matter of seconds, but throughout the film you get the sense that his actions are not his own. He's only a ruthless killer when the mother persona takes over. So I think people can sympathize with a character who's clearly been heavily oppressed and had significant trauma. And that's all the questions. I know I'm a bit late in getting this up, but thank you anyway to whoever tagged me. And I'm going to tag the channel's False Proxy Sessions, Harrison Califrax, Razorwire Reviews, and Queenie Todd. And if you're watching and you feel like doing it, then by all means go ahead. Well, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio.